Hi for Connect. I'm going to talk you through our writing lesson for week 3. So you're going to need these two sheets, the one that says Matthew Flinders and information about him. If you don't have it, that'll be on screen now. And also the information Matthew Flinders report, and it should be blank. It has this little picture on the top there. So what we're going to do this week and next week is study information reports. And when we write an information report, it's just information and facts. So we try not to give our opinion or how we're feeling. It's not too creative. We can make it interesting to read, but we try and keep it to the facts. We also need to write the facts in our own language so that it makes sense and it doesn't sound strange or like a science report. Okay, so I'm going to read this, and as I read it, I'm going to fill out parts of my notes page, and the notes need to come in full sentences, but try and use your own words. So don't just copy the information or my words, but you can use mine as a guide. Okay, let's read it. Matthew Flinders, 1774 to 1814, died at age 40. He wasn't very old. Matthew Flinders was the first person to circumnavigate around Australia and identify it as a continent. That means he was the first. Circle, navigate means to direct. Circumnavigate means to go around like a circle. And continent is a landmass. So he was the first person to go all the way around Australia. He was born in Lincolnshire, England on the 16th of March, 1774. He developed his love for the sea and exploring after reading the adventure story Robinson Crusoe. Flinders joined the British Navy at the age of 15. Now, then it goes on to talk about his voyages. Flinders first sailed to Australia in 1795 on the ship Reliance. Together with the ship's surgeon, George Bass, Flinders explored the coastline of southern Australia in an 8-foot long boat called Tom Thumb. Let's start to fill in our information, our writing, on the next page. As we read, we can get facts and order them. So the first part is the introduction with the explorer's name. We need to say who is it that we're talking about. So we found that he was the first person to circumnavigate around Australia. So I've started with Matthew Flinders was a famous explorer who was the first person to sail all the way around Australia. So you could write something like that. So Matthew Flinders was known to be the first person to sail the whole way around Australia, or you could use the word circumnavigate if you feel confident understanding that word. So we're not just copying it, we're putting it in our own words, maybe taking a few words out. Now, also in our introduction, we're going to mention the early life and his family background. So write a sentence about his early life, where he was born and grew up, and their training and their marriage and their family. So I've looked over here and I've got here where he's born. So Matthew Flinders was born in England. I don't need the place necessarily. I can put that in if I like. On the 16th of March, 1774. So I'm just going to check the spelling, capital letters, keeping both my sheets there. Now you might have to flip backward and forward. He joined the British Navy at just 15 years old, so I think that's quite important. I don't necessarily need to mention about his love for adventure. I could put that in if I wanted to. And I'm going to find out further on who he married, so I'll leave a bit of a gap there. Now, the main part of our report will be a paragraph where we've got important events. You might want to write, if you're writing this out as a final copy, you'd write important events of his travels. So here we're going to describe his adventures in order. So we're going to put dates, write a sentence about each voyage he went on, and include the dates, ships, other people, and the things that happened. Write in your own words. So as we're reading, let's pull out information and put it into our words. It says Flinders first sailed to Australia in 1795 on the ship Reliance together with the ship's surgeon, George Bass. Flinders explored the coastline of southern Australia in an 8-foot long boat called Tom Thumb. So I could write most of that, but let's simplify it. So his first trip to Australia was in 1795 with George Bass, and we could put a full stop. He explored the south of Australia. So let's see what I've written down. Matthew's first voyage to Australia was in 1795, full stop. He explored the coast of southern Australia with George Bass. Okay, that's enough, just 2 sentences. Nice and simple in my own words. Now let's read on, because I've written a bit more about that time. Have a look 3 years on. In 1798, Flinders and Bass, again George Bass, circumnavigated, there's that word again, to go around, Van Diemen's Land, which is now known as Tasmania, aboard the Norfolk. Their trip proved Van Diemen's Land was an island and not part of mainland Australia. So remember, they didn't have maps, and these sailors and ships people were sailing to trade, so they didn't know the land. They didn't have maps for all the areas. The stretch of water separating mainland Australia and Tasmania was named Bass Strait after George Bass. So while he's with Bass, I've also mentioned this voyage over here. Then 3 years later, Matthew and George sailed the whole way around Van Diemen's Land. So rather than circumnavigate, I've said they sailed the whole way around Van Diemen's Land. Okay, and they proved it was an island. Full stop. So you can write your own sentence for that. You might want to say Flinders and Bass sailed all the way around Van Diemen's Land. They named the ocean Bass Strait, and they proved that Tasmania was an island. So I've got here, they named the sea between Australia mainland and Tasmania Bass Strait after George Bass. So we're taking these facts and we're putting it in our own words. We're still mentioning the words, but we're trying to make it flow as we might say it, changing it around a bit. All right, let's read on and see if we can find some more information. Flinders returned to England on the Reliance in 1800. Matthew Flinders married Anne Chapel in England in April 1801, before again setting sail for Australia in July 1801. So let's just write it back up here in the introduction. So he joined the British Navy at just 15 years old, and we can write on here, he married Anne Chapel, P-E-L-L, oops, just fit that in England in April 1801. So that's enough about his early life or his family life. So let's come back to his travelling. It said that before again setting sail for Australia in July 1801 on board the Investigator, between December 1801 and June 1803, Flinders mapped the coastline of Australia. So I'm going to mention that he made maps of Australia between this time. So I've put here, on July 1801, Flinders returned to Australia and mapped the whole coastline of Australia until June 1803. Or I could reword that. Okay, he spent 3 years making maps of Australia, I could say. Going down, it says on the 8th of April 1802, Flinders was sailing east and encountered a French explorer, Nicholas Baudin, aboard the ship La Géographie. The two men exchanged details of their findings. This exchange completed the map of Australia's coastline. The location of this meeting was named by Matthew Flinders as Encounter Bay. So I've just mentioned here too, someone that helped him map Australia was the French explorer Nicholas Baudin, helped to complete the maps, you can write, of Australia. My writing's getting a bit messy. Try and keep it neat and watch your spelling. All right, let's finish off and find out his last voyages. In June 1803, the Investigator was leaking and in need of repair. Flinders was forced to stop his investigations on the northern coast and return to Sydney by the west coast. Flinders set sail to return to England on board the Cumberland. The boat was forced to stop for repairs in Mauritius on the 17th of December 1803. At this time, England was at war with France, and Flinders was imprisoned as a spy. So even though he wasn't, that in Mauritius the French were ruling, that's an island, and they imprisoned him. He spent almost 7 years imprisoned on the Mauritius. During this time, he recorded the details of his voyages for future publication. So I might write down a new paragraph here. Okay, on his return to England, he was put in prison by the French army in Mauritius. Check your spelling. Mauritius on 17th December, the whole word December 1803, where he was stuck for 7 years. He was stuck for 7 years. I'm running out of room, and you can write this on the back if you've got room. Okay, then at the end of his life, I'm going to start a new heading. Write a sentence about the end of the explorer's life. So I've got here that he returned to England in October 1810. Once back in England, Flinders began to prepare his notes for publication. So he's producing maps and books about Australia. His book, A Voyage to Terra Australis, was published on the 18th of July 1814. Matthew Flinders died the next day, aged only 40, so it took him about 4 years to write that book. So in his last 4 years of life, he published maps and published a book and maps about his voyages or about Australia. And then we can put sadly, rather than died, we can put passed away. That's a bit nicer. Sadly, he passed away on the 19th, so it was the next day, the 19th of July 1814, and sadly he passed away on the 19th of July 1814 at the age of 40. So I've taken most of the facts but put it in my words and taken lots of bits out, keeping it a bit simple. What were the main achievements of the explorer? At the end, my last paragraph. Now it just says here, while Matthew Flinders was named no places after himself, there are numerous sites named in recognition of his explorations. Okay, I can just put he was always remembered, or Matthew Flinders will always be remembered. Flinders will always be appreciated for his exploring or maps of Australia. Matthew Flinders will always be remembered as the explorer to sail around Australia, or to sail around Australia and make and publish maps maybe publish accurate maps or publish maps of the country. So before that,